everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Today I have Steve Green, who on Instagram goes by The Greens Collection. First of all, Steve, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks. Great to be here. Thanks for taking the time.
So I'm actually going to ask you, how would you best describe your collection?
So I primarily collect signed Hall of Fame rookie cards. I think I'm like most, and I have a smattering of other things, but that's the lane that I've sort of chosen as I've given focus to my collection. And it originally started as three of the sports that I'm biggest fan of: baseball, basketball, and football, which it still is, but it's most of my focus now is football and basketball.
Well, let's start with how you got started. How did you start collecting? What kind of got you interested in it and interested in starting to get the Hall of Fame autographs?
It's interesting. I've thought about this after watching a few of your videos, and I'm like, how did this actually all get started? And so it was kind of like a fun walk down memory lane for me. So I have a brother who's a few years older than me. And he was, when we were kids, right? Like I grew up in the 80s and 90s. And so junk wax was our jam. And growing up outside Philly, my brother was a big Mike Schmidt collector. So I sort of cut my teeth on cards and autographs, like having that. That said, and I think one of the things that's also interesting is, I grew up in a little town just outside Atlantic City, where the casinos are. And so, you may or may not know, a lot of athletes love to gamble. If you watch if you watch The Last Dance last summer, I think MJ talked a bit about, or maybe it was 2 summers ago now, his exploits. But so my folks were always like people would come through, and so like autographs were kind of like just one of those things early on. And so I have a few things that I think are kind of cool. So like, for example, so this is Walter Payton. So you can see two Steve, Walter Payton, two Joel, which is my brother's name, 34. But what's sort of unique to me, it's just like a cut autograph, so that is a request for Phil at the Trump Taj Mahal, which is a now defunct casino in Atlantic City. So it was just kind of, and I have like Sixers and Eagles stuff where if you like flip the back over, it'll be like, oh, charity event at this casino or that casino. So it was always just sort of around. But when I was a kid, you couldn't get rookie card, right? It was taboo to sign rookie cards. And so that as the pandemic, like a little bit before the pandemic, I follow the arc of most of the folks, or many of the folks. Like I think Brian talked about this a little, like you sort of collect up through high school and then you move away. And so like I've moved back a little bit over the last few years, and coming back into it, it was super fun to get into signed rookie cards, because that was not something that I ever did as a kid.
Mm-hmm. So are you just kind of looking at purchasing cards that have already been signed and authenticated? Are you going out and trying to get stuff still signed on your own through the mail, things of that nature?
Yeah, all of the above. So there's, I really enjoy TTM, like through the mail. I participate in a bunch of private signings. I've done a handful of like public, like at the National last summer. I met, I stood in line and waited to chat with Dr. J and got his autograph. But in general, like I don't do the in-person thing and like chase guys down, and I don't do a lot of like going to public signings. And then as of late, because I feel like I've been to the end of the internet and back on the TTM stuff, it's and what's been a lot of fun is like meeting other collectors and doing, digging into their collections. So like sort of private, kind of like off the book stuff has been another big way for me.
Yeah. That seems to be so invaluable if you're looking to get into this. It's just finding the other collectors that are also really heavily into this and just it's been really interesting for me to also reach out to a bunch of people here recently and really discover what people just sort of have just tucked away in boxes. And there's so many great things of people who are like, yeah, they've been going around and getting stuff signed for like decades, or even if they're just kind of recently getting into it, but they just went into it headstrong, and they just like that within the few months have like hundreds, if not thousands, of things already signed, and just things that are just that you don't find just going through eBay or any of the other public places, you know?
Yeah, it's bananas what some folks, some of these folks who've been doing this for a while have at just sort of like, you're right, like just in their stacks. And it's also really interesting because there's sort of, it feels like there's kind of sort of two worlds to collecting, which is one is that like highly digitally enabled kind of like internet savvy collector who scours eBay and is on a bunch of the auction houses and uses like the card ladders of the world. And then there are these people who are like, they don't do any of that stuff. And they have, just tons of treasures. And so it's been fun to have a foot in both. Like for example, I was talking to a guy who I got hooked up with ultimately on Instagram, but originally through sportscollectors.net. And one of the things that I like to collect, in addition to the Hall of Fame rookie cards, is football. They do these all decade teams. Mm-hmm. So there's, they go all the way back to the 20s. And so the original crop was done as part of the NFL's 50th anniversary. So like the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s all decade team were done after the fact. And they didn't, there weren't tons of cards back then. So there was a set that it's called 1977 Touchdown Club. And it's pretty plain, right? It's just like and I can grab one in a second, but it's just a white border with a black and white photo, but it has a ton of these old timers. And I was talking to a guy about Red Grange, and then there's another guy named Cecil Isbell who will probably get into the Hall of Fame soon, who's played in the 30s. And I was like, I'm trying to track one of these down. And he sent me a picture, and he had like a dozen of each with pristine autographs. Man, none of them were slabbed or anything like that. And so it's always fascinating to get to dig into stuff like that and talk to people about their collections.
Yeah. So, what in your collection are you like most proud of, or just some of the highlights that you've accumulated and are just most excited about?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think, proud's interesting, but the stuff that I really like to collect, there's a few things. And so one of the things I want to talk about, because I know in a couple of your recent interviews you've talked about, it seems like you seem to wrestle with inscriptions a little bit.
Yeah.
Talk about how you like the NBA top 50, but not necessarily. And so I think inscriptions are super cool. So that's one thing that I do. I try to do, so like, for example, I don't know, the glare might kind of stink, but so this is like a team issued Denny Crum card. And so Denny Crum's in the Hall of Fame. And I'm probably going to mess up the orientation, but if you see there on the top, it says Cool Hand Luke. And so that's what he was called for his, for his cool hand. And I got this through, like I tracked this card's not easy to find. It's not expensive. I think on eBay, and then got him TTM, and you just write a letter and ask for that. And so like I have like that stuff, smatterings of that throughout my collection. And so it's fun it's like another way to connect with the player. And that like when you're researching, if you don't like, I didn't know a ton about Denny Crum, but I knew he signed through the mail well. And I knew he had a couple sort of fun, like random rookie cards. It's like, what would be fun things to have them inscribe? And so that's one. The 69 top set basketball is amazing. And there was an insert in that called Topps Rulers. And one of the things I love about vintage is it's art, right? And you've had folks talk about this. And I think these rulers are sort of all that makes cards cool, right? It's like a cartoon. They're huge, which is not like, it's kind of a pain to store them. But so this is Jerry West And so I went through a thing where I was like, oh, do I like it across? And then I settled on along the ruler. So I have a bunch of those. I have all of the signed, and I also have the set graded, but not signed, the whole set. And so I have all of the living guys except Billy Cunningham and Willis Reed. And then I have Wes Unseld, who was the one deceased person that I have. But they're super hard to find, so it's a fun chase. And I think the cards are fun. And then my big focus for football is the 100th anniversary team.
Okay.
And so I have about, it's about 110 folks if you include the coaches, give or take. And so I have about 75 of those. And the ones who I do not have are tough, right? It's guys like, guys like Walter Payton. He's not actually super tough. He's just he's just expensive. But then
everyone wants a Walter Payton. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And then some of that, you get into some of the older guys. Like there's a few guys on it who passed early or maybe only had a card way back in the day. And so I have a pretty thorough collection of those guys. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because I'm not as knowledgeable about vintage football autographs in particular, and which guys are really truly difficult to find, and some of the data points on some of that. So, yeah, what are some of the ones that you have found that were just truly difficult to find, or some that you're still looking for that you haven't found yet?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. So there's a lot of similar to the 57 Top, 61 Fleer chase in basketball. There are those early football sets. So 48 Bowman and 48 Leaf are two of the big ones, and then 52 Bowman. There's 48 through. There's more consistency with the football in the early years, but those are some of the big ones that are super fun, but really tough to find. Guys like Sid Luckman, Bob Waterfield, right? Like Bob Waterfield, his 48 Leaf, there's 0 in the PSA DNA Pop report. So that's all. Like, so those were just tough. And again, like if you go back to like how it was taboo for a while, to get rookie cards signed. So they're just there just weren't a lot of folks getting them signed for the folks who passed earlier. And so there's a few fun ones I have. So like Pete, Eagle Grape, the glares. Sorry about that. But so that you can see Pete, PP host, and this is his 48 Leaf. And there's a bunch of variations with the jersey. And one of the things that's, as you dig into this stuff, like, so you can see on the Hall of Fame 70 how he started with a 3. So as he had health issues later in life, he would oftentimes sign his jersey number instead of his Hall of Fame number. So there's things like that. There's another fun one. This is a Notre Dame great, a guy named George Connor. I apologize, that glare's terrible, but and someone punched a hole in the top there.
Yeah.
So those are good ones. A semi-recent pickup of mine that is a favorite right now. That I'll grab is Papa Bear, George Halas, with a pen, like a period signature. So this is a 52 Bowman large. So those are, and these, like all of these guys obviously predated both of us. He's one of the NFL OGs, like one of the founders of the NFL in its modern incarnation. So it's fun, right? And these cards are beautiful, like with the colors and it's almost pop art-esque, the 48 Leaf set.
I was gonna say that it looks so good on those 48 Leaf cards, especially. And I feel the same way about the 61 Fleer basketball that I'm collecting. Just especially if you have a vintage looking autograph on those cards, it just looks fantastic. Really reminds you of those old school baseball cards that had the facsimile autographs on them, like the old Topps cards. It just really adds to it.
Yeah, like those 61 Fleer, the portraits, right? Like the sort of base card. I mean, they're amazing. Like you think about the Jerry West, it's like Sam Jones and Oscar Rock. It's just like, and the colors. There's a few folks. So there's a good follow on Instagram guy named Patrick Ryan at the P Ryan Collection. We'll talk about 48 leaf across a few of the sports, and sort of has this theory that there's like some level of influence between those cards and Andy Warhol and some of his pop art, which, I mean, who knows, but it's just right.
Yeah.
And then there's another guy on there right now who's taken a bunch of the whose name escapes me, but he's going through like Roy G. Biv, like all the shades of the rainbow, and like these are cards with blue and these are cards with green, and it's super fun because it's like all these old vintage cards with different, like a 39 DiMaggio play ball and like the shade of blue in the background. So it's that's been something I've come to appreciate as I've dug into some of these vintage cards more.
Yeah. And I was flipping through your collection earlier, and I'm an OU graduate, and so I couldn't help but notice the Tommy McDonald that you also have. Is he someone that's difficult to find? Or, I mean, I know as an OU collector, it's somewhat easy to find some of his stuff on OU memorabilia, but I didn't know about some of his NFL cards and how difficult he's been to find in those.
Yeah, he's so he's also an Eagles great. So he's one of my he's a guy that I've chased for a while. He signed a lot, and so like his stuff, to your point, like, but his 57 Topps rookie card wasn't. I mean, they're out there, and they're not super. It's not a crazy expensive card when they do surface, but they don't surface much. Right? I think I've seen, probably 2 or 3. I will, while we're sitting here, I will pull them out. Sorry to lean away. But yeah, so and the 57 is another one. Sorry, I know this glare is not great. There we go. That's better.
I think that's the best football set, in my personal opinion. I don't know what your opinion is, but I do think 57 Topps might be the overall best football set ever.
It's it's amazing. So I love it because it has it has the great portrait shot. Let's see, there's Night Train. It has the half of it's the great portrait shot, and then it's got like an action shot, and the colors are great, and I think this is, I don't know that I felt through like my favorite, but yeah, this is definitely one of the best. And it's got, you got Bart Starr, Johnny Unitas, Paul Hornung, so it's one of those sets where it's just like pure gold. So that's a lot of fun. But yeah, Tommy Mac's card, his 57 rookie card, not super easy to find. They come up from time to time, and I've seen a bunch. You sort of like as my collection evolves, you get into the whole, right, sort of like the card as a piece of it, and then the signature as a piece of it, and it's like, well, what do you solve for? Like, do you want to, do you want a period autograph? Do you want a higher end card? You don't really care about the autograph. Do you want a better autograph? So like, I've seen a lot of his that are kind of like beater cards. Not a lot, a few, but seeing one in good shape they're tough to find.
Yeah. And yeah, both of your 57s you just showed look like they were in great shape, and the autographs look great. So yeah, when you find those vintage that are still so centered well and still has like all the colors that it should have, and the autograph is like either like a 9 or a 10. I mean, yeah, those aren't always easy to find, especially on certain sets. And sometimes you can search for years to kind of combine the two together to find sort of the perfect version of that particular player, particular set that you're looking for.
Yeah. And I know with your your 61 Fleer, right? Some of the it's your 61 Fleer. It's amazing to see some of the like period autographs in ballpoint pen, and then some of the guys would sign on the back then, which I think is like things like that. I've really come to appreciate, because it's less about like sort of what is perceived as like perfect now, like mint card, mint autograph, and more like this is how they signed back then. So I love that.
Yeah, I love it too. If I can find, when I can find something that definitely seems like it was signed or potentially signed back in the day when they were probably playing or close to when the time the set came out, that's I really fall in love with finding things like that for sure. Do you have favorite athletes that you've kind of maybe dealt with personally, or just favorite athletes that you just really have honed in terms of collecting, over the years?
Yes. So, and again, some of this goes back to like being a Philly sports guy. So Reggie White is my all-time favorite. Like, I grew up on those 80s gangrene Eagles teams. So I'm slowly working through, like, unsigned, the Reggie White master set on PSA. And so I have a bunch there, and it's great because, like, most of that stuff's not, and I don't really care if it's a 10 or whatever. Like, it's like, as long as it's looks to 6, 7, 8, 9, and a lot of that stuff's pretty inexpensive. And then I have his 86 Topps rookie card signed, as well as his 86. So McDonald's did an insert, McDonald's did packs, like they did a game to scratch off and win stuff. So there are lots of teams that have like team subsets. So they're a little bigger. And so it comes in a couple different colors, but it's a fun card. So I have hit Reggie White's signed, his 86 green McDonald's. He is a really tough, his signature is notoriously sloppy. So he is, one of the things I'm actually trying to get is like that in a 10 auto, cause it was super streaky and there's always fingerprints, and it just kind of, was like a big sloppy autograph. It's great cause it's legible and there's usually a Bible verse with it. But a 10 auto of his on his rookie card would be fun. And then his 84 Topps USFL, which, that USFL set's super cool, right? There's guys like Herschel Walker, Jim Kelly, and Steve Young have rookie cards in it. I haven't been able to, I've yet to see one of those in existence. So that's kind of like a white whale of mine. Barkley is a guy I PC for basketball. I have his 86 Topps rookie card, and a couple other signed cards. And he has his star, and it's called JM, like a star, and then there's an 85 JMS, which is like a full insert. I do not have either of those signed, but those are ones I'm working on. It's fun that the star ones are fun to get signed, and now that PSA is grading some of them, which is I do chase the set registry. I'm excited to get some of those added.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that you had a few of the star cards in your collection as well, and definitely one of the things I'm kind of looking into as well is like trying to find some of the autographed star cards of those guys during that time period. Because I think it's gonna be interesting to see how those numbers play out in the PSA registry, not just for the graded ones, but for the autographed ones, and where they're going to sort of level off at here when enough people start seeing them in and kind of seeing those numbers. Because obviously, Star didn't have very many cards distributed out to begin with. They were usually around the 5,000 range of total cards that were sent out, and then you got to think, well, how many people were willing and brave enough to send those off to get signed, or to, even brave enough to say, oh, this is definitely authentic Star card, and this is definitely authentic signature, and so I want to go send it off and get authenticated and graded and all those things. So that where I'm getting to, I guess, is that the numbers of those I suspect are going to be pretty low for quite some time.
Yeah, I totally agree, and it'll be interesting to see. Everybody has these debates about like pack pulled rookie card, which is sort of like the definition of rookie versus the XRC stuff. But to your, like, there's right, like the pop reports on some of the 86 Fleer stuff, there's just so much of it out there. And so I do wonder over time, like, how that will, you take into account the more limited production of the Star stuff, the headwind of PSA not slabbing or grading them, that's going away. And then there's they're real, like, right, like Isaiah Thomas, the one you just posted not long ago, gorgeous card.
Mm-hmm.
But that's from the 83, 84 year. Like I think like to me, that's more interesting than his 86 rookie card, just because it came out when he was actually a rookie. So it's those are fun to chase, but they're not not for the faint of heart. The ones, and if you want to get them slabbed by Beckett, which is what's out there now, because you want to make sure it's not the counterfeit or what have you. Like, none of them are inexpensive.
Going to basketball, I suppose. So for basketball, is it just pretty much about getting as many of the Hall of Famer rookie autos that you can get? Or are there other things that interest you when it comes to basketball stuff?
Yeah, so there's the Hall of Fame rookie autos is the big focus. The Naismith Hall of Fame is interesting because it's just so much broader than baseball and football, in the sense that, like, they're much more liberal, not liberal, but the contributor categories, and you have international inductees and things like that. So it's fun in that regard, but it's also like, and every year 6, 8, 10 more people that they add. So it's a pretty daunting chase. So I've focused a lot on the NBA 50 and now 75th anniversary teams, which is kind of cool because you've gotten like a big swath of modern guys with the 75th anniversary team. And there are some heavy hitter NBA 50 and NBA 75 collectors out there. I have I want to say like 40 or 45 of the top 75 guys. And so there are a lot, and I do a lot of that, a lot of the other Hall of Famers through TTM. And then as we were talking about 86 Fleer just a second ago, I love the stickers. I remember these as a kid. And so I have the entire sticker set autographed, with the exception of Jordan, which I will get one day. It's out there. It's just, again, I don't buy lots of cards that I could buy a car instead of. So maybe, one day I'll get there, but not there. So, like, here's, talking about the inscription. So that's Thomas with the Bad Boys for Life inscription.
That's a cool inscription. Yeah, I could definitely get behind that type of inscription. Yes.
Yeah. So that's a fun one. And then that's the only one of those I pulled out. But yeah, so I have that 86 sticker set, which I think is super cool. And that's, so it's top 75 guys, Hall of Fame, and then I love the stickers.
And I also noticed you seem to like to find some of the really important contributors and coaches of the different sports, right? Like, I saw your Jerry Buss autograph card, which I thought was really cool. Because you don't find too many Jerry Buss stuff out there, at least not very often from what I've seen. And guys like Greg Popovich those to me are also pretty cool. You really have to, and I think as we get more and more into, people doing more documentaries and more content about the importance of some of these pioneers, not just the players who played the game, but the people behind the decision-making and things that led to these particular sports becoming what they are now. Those are also really interesting, and you don't always find them. Like, you don't always find, I mean, you can find like Red Auerbach stuff, but I think his stuff is starting to be, the price points of his stuff, I think, is starting to sort of reflect what people think in terms of his importance of what he meant to the NBA,
Yeah, it's thank you. And yeah, it's fun. One of the fun things about collecting is the guy you had on talking about signed 33 Gowdy, whose name escapes me, but like, it was so fascinating to hear him talk about the history of the Gowdy Gum Company and some of those, right? And so, like, it really drives an appreciation for, sure, like the end goal is like a card with an autograph on it, but you really start to learn about like what these people did. And so for me, that's been, because it really makes me, like, I've been on like a little bit of like a WNBA top tier player autograph kit because a bunch of them signed through the mail, and their cards are relatively easy to find. But like I think when you look back, and you think about like the beginning of the WNBA and how it evolved, and like that's a part of the sport, right? And like you think about guys like Jerry Buss and Red Auerbach, and I mean, Bill Russell is immensely appreciated now, but I think he is still like wildly underappreciated for everything he did on the court, off the court. And so it's fun to dig into that stuff as well.
Absolutely. I mean, that's sort of a big reason why I sort of gravitated towards the 61 Fleer basketball set is because you look at pretty much every single person in that set, because it's a small set, only 44 players, and like almost half of them are in the Hall of Fame. And a lot of those people, even if they're not Hall of Famers, they went on to be some sort of major contributor to the sport of basketball, it seems like, whether it's like Al Addles, who became one of the first African-American head coaches in the league and one of the first ones to win an NBA championship as a head coach, to Wayne Embry, who was one of the first African-American team executives in the NBA. Johnny Red Kerr, Larry Costello, all these guys that really made some really significant contributions to the game after their playing days. It's fascinating to learn about those type of things, and you just get that connection for some reason when you start collecting them and you start looking at finding things of theirs that they've autographed or that has some sort of personal connection with them. And I don't know, it just sort of leads, for me personally, just kind of takes you down a really interesting rabbit hole of learning all sorts of things about them,
Yeah, absolutely. I love the 61 Fleer set and how you're chasing the entire set. I that is not for the faint of heart. So I will admire your project from afar.
Yeah, from a distance. Yeah.
But to your point, like it's great. And then, I think there's also, as an autograph collector, like the way that those guys signed their name, compared to how players sign today, or not even just players, but like it's that in and of itself, I think is really fascinating. Like just the time they took to sign their autograph and how they took such care with it. And I think that is another part that just to me is it's very charming.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Well, did you have some other things that you wanted to showcase or share with us?
No, I mean, I think that was a good flavor for what the Green S collection is all about. And I appreciate you spending some time with me. So no, I think I'm good.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we hit all the things you kind of wanted to personally showcase. Are there other things that you're kind of on the lookout for right now? Anything that you want to shout out and see if there might be some people out there that can maybe help you for things that you might still be looking for?
I mean, honestly, I'm always looking for any vintage, like tougher to find, but any vintage, some of those sets I rattled off, football and basketball, but I know there's a lot of folks chasing that basketball stuff that you have interviewed on here as well. And then in general, like for me, I think the community is the best part of the hobby. So, right, like the way you and I struck up a conversation and it's led to this, and like I'm a big fan of yours. So no, if anyone just wants to talk shop or whatever, feel free to reach out, and otherwise just hit me up with a follow on Instagram.
Yeah, once again, that's the Greens Collection on Instagram. And is that the best way? Are there any other platforms that you're on, or is it just essentially IG is probably the best way to reach you?
Yeah. I mean, I lurk in all the other stuff, SCN and a bunch of the Facebook groups, but Instagram's the best way. Yeah.
All right. Well, Steve, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time that you committed to coming on and talking about your collection. I really appreciate it. You have an amazing collection, and yeah, I encourage anyone watching this to go and take a look and reach out to Steve. And yeah, I mean, like you said, this is one of my favorite parts about doing this now is reaching out to people and striking up conversations about what they love to collect and how long they've been collecting all these things. I just have been really enjoying it. So thank you once again. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for the time, Kurt. It was great chatting, and I love the interview series, and I'll keep watching.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Bye.